Got to give our man Seth Emerson some credit because he wrote a great piece. If you've not had a chance to read it, and it gets to what I think is something that everybody's kind of wondering, and that is when Kirby Smart's going to address some of the things that are going on. Seth joins us right now on the waitforward.com hotline. And Seth, thanks again. We appreciate your time. I just want to start with, do you think this has been an issue for the Dogs, or that we're just getting aware of the things, and I'm talking about, speeding and racing and all of these things. Has this been an issue, or were you aware of any of this stuff prior to these reports coming out?
There haven't been these, and there's obviously been a lot of, let's be frank, arrests with this program. And honestly, many SEC programs. I go back to my days covering South Carolina. And then I started on the Georgia beat in 2010 when it was kind of at its worst under Mark Richt, as I started my piece today with. Like, this has happened, arrests, misdemeanors, a lot. The racing part is new. Now, that's people getting arrested for it. Has it been happening? As this has come out, you start to hear more anecdotal evidence of or anecdotal stories from people around saying, yeah, this has always been happening. People have always done this. And you hear, Jalen Carter now merges, had an 89 and a 45 last fall. This is just something that clearly Kirby Smart needs to get the clamps on. I'm sure he probably already has. He just hasn't addressed it publicly yet because he hasn't been scheduled to meet with the media. This is kind of a dead time as far as him being publicly available. But it's something that he clearly has to address with the team, and I'm sure he already has. Whether that'll do any good, I mean, we'll see. I would think he shouldn't even have to say anything after two people die in a car accident caused, apparently, in large part by street racing. But it probably is something that needs to be said, and you probably need to attach some definite consequences to it.
It's a great article, guys. Definitely worth your reading. The Athletic Seth Emerson's take on where things are going right now. We were talking off the air, Seth, and I know it's a loaded question, but I'll ask anyway. You talked about Mark Richt and all the things that happened. I covered it on the radio when it went down. It seemed like it's almost a Georgia player couldn't spit on the sidewalk without getting in trouble in Athens a decade ago. Did Kirby learn to have a facilitator like Gant from when he was in Tuscaloosa from Nick Saban, to have somebody as a liaison to local law enforcement?
Gant's been around for a while. That hasn't been a secret. And talking to people within the program, the way they describe it, he's a positive force. He's someone who connects he is a liaison with the police department. And it should be said that it doesn't seem like it's anything nefarious based on the amount of times that Georgia players continue to get arrested. He's not, if he is fixing situations, if he's getting to the scene and fixing something, quote unquote, so that the public doesn't find out about it, then he's not doing that great a job, because Jamon Dumas-Johnson was arrested for, took it almost 2 months later, but they looked into it and found him. If anything, for years, Georgia fans, even people at the school and in the athletic department have alleged that both police departments here locally, the Athens Police Department and the UGA Police Department, have gone out of their way to target athletes and specifically football players. So it's not the other way around where things are getting swept under the rug. Gant's role as the liaison is to basically act in the best interests of the players without it skirting the law, without getting into that gray area of doing something that obviously you shouldn't be doing.
Do you think because of the optics of it, and you just explained it very well, but from outsiders looking in, that there will be a zero tolerance policy when it comes to anything an athlete does now in Athens, especially when he gets behind the wheel of a car?
Yeah, I mean, as I wrote, it's difficult to say zero tolerance on anything. Like Stetson Bennett got popped in Dallas for something that, if that happened in Athens and he was on the Georgia football team, I don't think he's getting tossed from the team for that. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure he's getting suspended. But it could as far as driving stuff, I think that may be something that Kirby Smart, or if the administration may have to do it, say we're going to outline some consequences that are harsher than they have been for specific offenses, especially street racing. I don't think you can retroactively go back and tell Javon Dumas-Johnson that he can't play here anymore, or he gets a huge suspension for something that he did it 5 days before the accident. So it's not like he did it knowing what had happened to his friends. But you can say, look, if we hear about this, even if there's no arrest, like if someone tells Brian Gann, I saw, so-and-so doing this, and we can prove it, then, you're gone, something like that. DUIs could be ratcheted up in terms of punishment. Javon Bullard got a DUI during the season last year, and he sat one game. Do you start saying, all right, we're going to say that's more now? And I do think common sense says you do want to leave some leeway. Every situation is different, but we have noticed, if you remember in the early 2010s, it was the zero tolerance kind of policy, near total zero tolerance, that Mark Richt felt like he had to do that to rein things in. And, it became a meme, a joke, like Mark Richt has lost control of such and such. But that was because he was suspending for stuff that other teams weren't suspending for. Georgia had this marijuana policy that nobody else in the SEC had.
Right.
And, players were being suspended for stuff that, arrests and stuff that they weren't being suspended for at other places because they had to do that. I think they've slowly, not because Kirby Smart was hired and said, there's a new sheriff in town, but more because the near total zero tolerance policy worked. And you're never going to end arrests as we know it on a football team. I mean, look, there's 85 players on scholarship plus 40 walk-ons. The math in and of itself says that it's going to happen. But it did ebb for a while there.
Right.
And so I think maybe they slacked off a little bit on some stuff. And now I think it's time to work a little bit more towards that near total zero tolerance policy, but especially on these driving and traffic offenses and drinking.
Seth Emerson, our guest, he writes for The Athletic, and he writes a piece that is entitled "Kirby Smart and Georgia Should Send a Message of Accountability," which is what he's talking about. And I totally agree with you. But I also have to ask, is this just a function of winning and having the best athletes in the country? There's no doubt that Georgia's program has been elevated. And when you're getting the top-notch talent that you're getting and you're winning at the clip that Kirby's winning at, is this just something that comes with it? I'm not talking about the deaths of two young people. I'm saying that when you have that kind of talent, kids feel entitled. Seth, they feel like they can do whatever they want. And if there is no accountability, which you're saying there hasn't been, this is the kind of stuff you deal with, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would. That's something, and I've heard this argument going back to not even argument, but point being made going back to early in the Mark or early last decade during the Mark Richt years, where football's a violent game, and for you to be good at this sport, then you may have to deal with some players who have some tendencies off the field. That's just part of their DNA. I'd hope that you don't have to make that sacrifice, but maybe there is some truth to that. But the idea that you have to sacrifice character in order to win, Georgia's made a point of saying that they don't do that, and that actually they seek out character, and that's what has made them better. Everyone talks about how well they recruit, but we also talk about, and I've written a lot about, how well they've evaluated and that they have passed on some people. And, they have sacrificed some things that weren't necessarily in the name of winning. I mean, Eric Gilbert hardly saw the field in his 2 years.
right,
because of stuff that was going on behind the scenes. And they didn't say, well, he's really good, so we're going to play him even though there's, he's having trouble behind the scenes and everything, and stuff that still hasn't been publicly to light, a lot of it for privacy, personal health reasons, but still. But I also say that, and this is a calculation, kind of, what am I trying to say? It's almost callous, but Georgia recruits so well and they have such good players, they probably can afford to dismiss people a little quicker and say, you know what, if you're going to screw up, the next guy's just as good. It's not going to, kill this program for you not to be on the team. And so that's probably something else Kirby Smart and his staff can tell players is, we've got some leeway here. We've won without you. We'll do that if you screw up.
The other thing is, Seth Emerson, guys, we're just tuning in, talking about moving forward now for UGA. By the way, we are moving forward. Is there another shoe to drop with Jalen Carter? Any other thing that's going to come up here that we should be prepared for? You're aware of?
I mean, something could. You never know. But checking on it yesterday, my understanding, for instance, the stuff that's been brought up about leaving the scene. I was told the police said we talked to him at the scene. They didn't see him leave the scene. So, maybe he was brought back to the scene, but they did not charge him with leaving the scene yesterday after a month and a half investigation. So if they didn't do that yesterday, they probably are not going to. There's probably not going to be more major developments in this case, is my understanding.
And the Ra Thomas thing, I know that's kind of a sidelight to this. I know he tweeted a photo of him at the Butts Mirror building, so that's still to be adjudicated, the situation he had with the girlfriend?
Yeah. That's something that has been kind of hanging out there, and when that initially happened, people assumed, oh, well, he's gone. But he was out quick with a statement saying that he was not admitting to the charges and was disputing them, and so that legal process is playing out. And everyone needs to be fair to Jalen Carter in this. He released a statement yesterday also saying that he's going to fight the charges. So there has to be don't naturally assume that the charges are true.
Seth Emerson joining us here on Dukes and Bell as we talk about all things dogs. Guys, there's no bigger story right now in football because Jalen Carter could be, again, the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. He has made his way back to the combine, as we talked about. I want to ask you about Nolan. And, I saw him speak at the combine, and Nolan Smith. Listen, I don't think you being passionate about the love for your friend who you've lost helps you in the draft. But I do think him talking about the situation and talking about Jalen and where he's at, Nolan's stock is already high, Seth. But I'm curious to know what you think about how he's handled this whole situation, and what do you think about his draft stock right now?
He's an interesting case because he's always been known for his character and for his leadership in the locker room. And as much as it hurt him to go down with that injury and miss the latter half of last year, it almost kind of helps him. I mean, it was a shoulder injury, so it's the kind that he should be fine by the start of the season, able to participate in the combine, yes. And it gave him a chance to show how good a teammate he is by staying with the team and still being a visible presence. He already had basically 3.5 years of film to show the NFL. He won a ring. He was on the field when they won last year. In fact, I think he had a sack on the final drive for Alabama. And so he gets to go into this combine and then just kind of remind people that what he can bring to the table. And yeah, I mean, I could see him getting back into that kind of top 50 range that a lot of people thought he could be, because don't forget, he was on some boards 4 years ago the number one recruit in the country.
Hey, great stuff, Craig. If you hadn't read the article in The Athletic, get Seth taken. By the way, I know it's funny. We talked a lot about it when it went down, the Todd Monken thing. It's kind of funny how is Monken going to get the same kind of effect that all the guys who work for Saban got, kind of like the reworking of the image? Because I know you got a kick out of the fallout when that was announced he was coming back as the OC.
Bobo, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'll be really interesting to watch. There's still a lot of Georgia people who are kind of assuming it's the Mike Bobo of the Mark Richt era, and obviously he is who he is. But I think he's probably learned a lot. He had 5 years at Colorado State. He had a year each at Auburn and South Carolina, and when he may not have worked for offensive geniuses at those spots, and he was the one who was running the show at Colorado State, but 1 year to work with Todd Monken, and I think he's probably evolved. I mean, he's only 48 years old. We're not talking about a dinosaur here.
Great stuff. We appreciate you, Seth. Good work. We'll continue to check you out. Read him, guys, The Athletic, as he covers the Dogs and all these stories that continue to develop here as we get closer to the NFL draft. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Seth Emerson.